Hello, everyone. My name is Chris Hawley. I'm the social media manager here at Noman, and welcome to Stylized 3D character art with Riot Games. Very excited to have you here tonight. I can see all y'all in the chat really excited. So, just as a quick question for everybody in the chat, I know a lot of you are here to join and find out all this cool stuff about Ahri. But are you all Ahri mains? I want to know your League of Legends main. Go ahead and put it in the chat. I want to see who else is an Akali main, because that's me. I'm really excited to have y'all here. Some quick housekeeping. If you're looking for some closed captionings, head over to Facebook or our YouTube page. And we really want to take a second to thank our sponsors, Dell and NVIDIA. Without them, we wouldn't be able to provide you with such amazing content as you're about to see. And speaking of amazing content, if you like what you see, please like, subscribe, tell all your friends, put it in the chat in that same, if you're, playing ARAM, just spam the link in ARAM, just let people know all the fun industry stuff that we do here at Noman. Tonight, we're thrilled to welcome Katia Bourykina and Blair Armitage, two incredible artists behind the iconic Ahri in League of Legends and Riot Games' innovative projects. Together, they'll dive into the evolution of Ahri's design, from modernizing her for animation to aesthetic developments for 2X KO. Now, at the end of tonight's stream, at the end of our presenters' presentations, we will have a Q&A. So please put your questions in the chat. And I, in the background, will be kind of compiling a list. And at the end, we'll try and get to all of the questions. The only thing that they ask is, they're here to talk about everything that's currently happening, even some past stuff, but don't ask about anything in the future. Again, I've already told you I'm an Akali main. I probably spent about 3 hours before we hopped on this stream begging them to tell me something. It didn't work, so I'm not going to waste any more time. So please, let's be respectful. Without further ado, welcome Blair and Katia. Hello, y'all.
Hi, thanks for having us. Yeah, I can start with a little bit about me if you like.
Yeah, of course. I'm gonna leave it to y'all. Y'all can take it away.
Hi guys. I'm Blair. I've been in games since 2012. I started out working in the UK, kind of in the Xbox 360 era. Started out working on Kinect games and licensed games, if anyone remembers those. I worked on Forza Horizon for a bit, doing characters and environments. After that, I traveled a bit and worked as a freelance artist for quite a few indie games, AA games, and then worked a bit in figures and miniatures. During that time, I was just really focused on building my portfolio on stylized characters, which is what I wanted to do. And then around 2017, got in touch with Riot and ended up moving to California and joined the company to work in the R&D department, which eventually became one of those games that became 2X KO, and that's what I'm currently focused on.
Yay. Hi, I'm Katia Bourykina. I go by Kata or Katia. I've been in games for about 15 years. I've been at Riot for the last 8.5 years. The first 6 was on League of Legends skins team, and then the last few have been on R&D. Before that, I used to be at Blizzard working on World of Warcraft, Warlords of Draenor, and Legion.
Cool. So I believe, I think now y'all have some amazing stuff to show us, which I have had the benefit of being able to see. But I think we're starting with Blair. Is that right?
Kata first.
Yep, I'll go first. Yeah.
Okay. I'm just so excited. I got it all mixed up.
Oh,
I apologize.
Great. Hello. I'll be going over the production for Ahri ASU with a deep dive into her texturing. ASU stands for Art and Sustainability Update. The primary focus is to reward popular champs so that way they become easier to develop skins for. If you don't remember, this is what original Ahri looked like. She came out back in December 2011. She's an incredibly popular champion, and it was very painful to make skins for her because of her proportions, her rig, her everything. She was just very outdated. You can kind of look at her hands and tell that they're much bigger than her face. So it was very awkward to put things closer to her face. And then, as you can tell, between looking at the two skins, or between the two bases, there's a lot of proportional adjustments, design adjustments, placements of her tails. We fully reworked her, brought her up to standards, and you can kind of see between the two and how different they are now. These are what we were looking at to whenever we were designing her. On the left is Paul Kwan's cinematic trailer design for Ahri for A New Dawn, and then Hitchum's design and Blair's model for 2XKO, which she'll be showing after this. And then on the right is the Wild Rift select screen Ahri. I don't 100% remember who worked on her. I want to say Charles Liu did the concept for her. And she's also very, very similar to the New Dawn version. And then this became our ASU Ahri concept by Thomas Rampey, who is an amazing concept artist. As you can tell, very similar to the designs. And then we made just like certain changes to make sure that she would work for readability in-game. We start this by creating a base mesh that we refer to as a starter mesh. This base was used on every Ahri skin, ensuring that it's easier skinning, better fit for base skin animations, and overall consistency between the skins. It also sped up modeling because character artists no longer had to make a bunch of new base meshes or cannibalize from older meshes. The tails were also placed in a horizontal manner rather than a diagonal one like the original or the Wild Rift one, and completely straight, so that way animation had complete control. For the tails, because there's a lot of them. In the past, when Ahri was running around, you would see all 9 tails, and they're kind of clumped together. They kind of look wonky. It created this messy read. When we were working on Spirit Blossom Ahri, which is one that I actually got to work on as well, we ended up creating a 10th tail to be used as her like big tail. Back when I made this tail, I made a mistake, and I wanted everything to be unique, and so I placed it on its own UV maps, which then created a bunch of issues because we decided that we wanted to turn her for markings into scrolling textures. So then I had to end up like reworking 2 UV sheets for the tails rather than just one. So for base, we went ahead and fitted the big version of the tail onto the main UVs, and you can tell that it's like the yellow one right here. The main 9 tails are actually 3 tails, which we ended up just duplicating over. We realized it's better to work smart and not hard and invest like the extra time into other cool things. All the UVs are set for scrolling, so future skins can reuse that for any like floofy or scrolling versions. The texture is actually just like a single texture that I end up painting once and then just copy paste it over because why not? They're actually really hard to tell that anything's different if they are different. So we wanted to invest in other areas, and yeah. And here is how the tails ended up coming out. The rig was created by the amazing Izzy Chang. And animation on the right, I believe, is by Einar Langjord. One of our major goals was to finally give like Ahri players the tails that they deserve, because it's always something that they really wanted. And the team felt like we actually accomplished that. They're finally floofy and whimsical and actually easy to work with. And so this is Ahri's wireframe. It's fairly simple. Everything flows together. Clothes match the loops on the starter mesh underneath, making it easier to skin as well. So for texturing, which is going to be like the main part that I'm going to talk about, we texture specifically for the in-game camera, and we need to make sure that everything reads well from a distance. Which is one of the reasons why I have multiple of them in the scene. I like to have Summer's Rift in the background, so that way I can see how the colors are looking. I like to also import either the concept or some references or swatches into the color palette over here. And that way I can actually color pick like the right colors that I want for her, the ones that I'm working for. For brushes, I just keep it really simple. I use a soft brush or the hard brush. I always make sure that Sharp Shape Old Style is on, as well as Sharp Shape with Alphas is on. I don't remember the difference. I just know I can tell if they're off. I also like to import her bind, idle, and running pose. Those are usually like the bind is what we work with, and then the idle and running is usually what you see on SR or ARM or wherever you're playing her. And so I like to be able to see on screen how the textures are looking, how they're stretching, how the light is reading. and then check her out from like camera angle. So that way I don't have to like constantly jump back into game and update the textures to see what they're looking like. I can just kind of like cheat it in here. To start off, I set up, so I model in 3ds Max. Riot generally uses Maya, but we can use whatever is needed, and as long as we save everything else, all our final files into Maya, but I'm a Max user. So I built her in there, and I usually set up some vertex colors, so that kind of helps me whenever I'm trying to see what I'm building. And then I import them into Marmoset, and I bake out an albedo in there, so that way I can go ahead and start my flats. And then I'll go ahead and start painting in some of the details that are missing from the bank and match the concept better. So you can kind of see. After that, I have a bunch of smoothing groups that are set up in Max, and I can bring it into 3D Coat, and then I can just do a quick AO bake. For this one, it was hemisphere and sphere. And as you can tell, it has like it nicely adds in some detail. Here, so this is me setting up some overlay lighting. I like to paint it really, really roughly. I just use a soft white brush and I set the layer onto overlay. And so it starts kind of building up some of this lighting for me. It's really messy. It's not great, but it works for what I needed to do. And then to make it grayscale, I just literally make a black layer, set the color to black, set the layer to color so everything is grayscale. And then I go ahead and start painting in a little bit, blocking stuff out. I like to work on faces. On faces, I kind of discovered that I like to just paint them in color because I end up repainting a bunch in color anyway, so I don't need to do them in grayscale as much. But here I kind of started blocking some stuff out and starting to block out some more of the materials, as well as like the skin, the golds. And I don't wait to set up my gradients until the end. I actually like to set up a lot sooner so I can kind of start seeing what it looks like. And that way I can see what's working, what's not working. And then I can also submit this whenever I'm uploading stuff for the team. So that way they can already look at it in color and not have to wait for the final pass. So whenever I'm working on this, wow, I totally forgot to change this. Sorry, guys. So gradient maps. Gradient maps are not plug and play. Sometimes they are when you have like a really good range of values, but oftentimes you need to adjust things to make sure that you place them in the right color, or the right color into the right value. The ones here were built at the very, very start. So my grayscale, as it evolved, so did my gradient maps, because I needed to adjust them with my values. After I got my colors figured out in the projection view, because I usually, I like to just project from 3D Coat and set up my gradient maps that way, just so I can see the whole thing as a scene. I then just like group everything and throw it into my source file, and then switch out all of the masks. And then I'm able to actually just throw that into, after I flatten them, I can just throw that into 3D Coat, because 3D Coat won't read gradient maps unless they magically change something like the past year. And this is, okay, so this is using color proofs, which is super helpful for me, because talking about values, I don't know how many of you use proof colors, but it's a great way to work in grayscale without actually having to turn your image into grayscale. A lot of the time, if I'm doing like projection painting from 3D Coat and I'm actually painting on top of a mesh, it projects it and project it back into 3D Coat. I can easily check and correct my values by turning on proof colors when I'm already working in color. And it lets me eyedrop the accurate color, even though I'm seeing it in grayscale, and lets me paint with it. Then occasionally I use it this way. I use it to check the values that I painted in grayscale versus the values that are appearing on my gradient maps. I do this first by like adding a very quick mask to my gradients folder. Here I just did half of it. Usually when I'm doing it, I actually just adjust it, like I added to like a little tiny part that I'm working on, so that way I can see like the section that it actually borders, similar to how it looks like with the skin here. And then I can check and try to adjust it to work, like actually match it up as much as I can. And I already have proof color set up, but if you want to set it up, you just go into view, proof setup, custom, set up dot gain 20, and then you can turn it on by the shortcut or through view. And as you can tell on the right, you can see that the GIF where I'm adding the gradient map to the red section, And whenever like the sliders are spread up evenly, you can tell that it's like not showing any good values that I painted. It's just kind of like flat. This is because the reds here are like, they're more in this like darker value right here. So adding sliders here just doesn't do anything because it's not reading this. So I need to be able to actually move them over correctly. And I try to go ahead and match up to the values that I have on this side. So that way my lighting is still staying consistent. I don't need to hit it 100%, just enough to where I don't lose like all of my forms and all of my lighting. And then, yeah, this is what it looks like. And then I turn it off and I continue rendering the materials. um, and so see, I'm blocking out hair and adding some shadows, continuing to work on the hair, giving it more form to the torso, refining the hair, getting the sleeve patterns, getting ready to switch to color. Just cleaned up stuff on the lower skirt because, like, if you look back here, it's a bit messy. And so when I'm working, it's like trying to make good decisions. And then, yes, I updated the gradients, like everything's reading really well. These are the gradients that I end up using. Like this was the original ones I started off with. These are the ones that I ended up with. I ended up having to use like 2 different ones for the hair because one of the hair, like I don't remember if it was the front or the back of the hair was slightly lighter. And so I had to use different ones. One of these is for nails. And then, yeah, just adjusted these to work better with the values that I had. Okay, and also now I'm going to talk about the median filter, which is amazing. And you can't really tell on this side if you kind of like look around this area around the golds, you can kind of see it, but this side will be better. So median filter is amazing. It helps blend the surrounding pixels based on brightness. If you select the layer that you want to do this on, you just go to filter, noise, median, and then you choose the pixel amount. Usually for like a 2K texture, I do 2 pixels and choose a 2K, so 2 pixels. And it helps kind of clean out like the edges around the masks. It helps harmonize my colors and like any area that's over detailed and too contrasted, which is like the gold. I tend to over render and get a little bit contrasty. So it's like it softens them up and blends them slightly better and like helps clean up some of this like messy mask. So it's great. I love using that. And I actually did not use blending options for this, but I did want to go ahead and show this technique. So here I have added a hue saturation layer for the masked out like the red material. And then I just right click on it, open up blending options and go down and start messing with the sliders at the very bottom. It's when you're moving them around, it's a hard blend, but you can break it by holding Alt and then I'll start like softening them up. I usually just use this when I want to add some kind of color on top. If I didn't get a chance to add it to my gradient map, or sometimes when my gradient map, when the values are too clamped, like if this red was worse and it was like a lot darker and a lot less to work with, instead of like trying to shove, I don't know, like 5, 6 sliders into a single gradient that has no space, I'll just usually just add this on top and then just throw that color in there. But super helpful, really cool effects that you can do. I did not do this for Ahri, but I probably could have. It would have looked nice. And then I'm going to render in color. Actually, go back to this one. Let me see. Yeah. So here, like very minor changes. I'm starting to clean her up. I'm trying to render out the materials a little bit better. Like you can tell the gems feel a little bit more like crystals here rather than just lit spheres. Here, I add some color dodge. Like I actually don't take my golds all the way to the brightest whenever I do my gradient maps because I want to have the ability to use color dodge on it very lightly. Because if you use too much color dodge, you're gonna have really like blown out or muddy textures. So I have to like very, very lightly add lighting to it and add it to the metals. Here also my like shoes were a little bit, the legs were pushed down a little bit too much. So I went ahead and just like added a bunch here, as you can tell. So that way she popped a little bit more, but super helpful. So yeah, color dodge very lightly. And then, yeah, continuing to clean up. I'm not liking some of the folds in the upper arm, so I take some of those out, darken the inside of the sleeves. I start adding secondary form lighting to the sides, like the torso and the arms. I also cleaned up the legs a little bit so they aren't as like dark and messy. You can tell like right around here is my secondary lighting. Same thing on the arms. It's a little hard to tell, but they're here. And that way, so whenever she's running around, it doesn't look like just like a dark side. So there's some form of form to it. Just click between these two so you can see that. And yeah, especially the legs. Like I think one of those things that I always notice people do, they'll have like really harsh painting along the sides of the legs or the inside of the legs. And you can always notice that, especially for a game like ours, because you run around and you just see them from the side sometimes. But yes, again, I use median here because my golds were popping a lot because I over-render them. And I have this tendency to really want to push them, but they got pushed a little bit too much to where this was noticeable. And so I went ahead and did median again. And then I just kind of painted the highlights out, especially right here, because it's like she's so small on screen. You don't want her to be too noisy, too buzzy. And then this is the final where I went ahead and added a bottom gradient to her and then a drop shadow. And that's pretty much it. And this is what she looks like next to the Wild Rift select screen Ahri. They're a lot closer together. They have their little differences, but those differences were specifically to help us create skins faster for her. And that's it. Thank you.
That's great. Thanks for sharing all of that. I was just writing down some questions because I also want to ask questions at the end about the hand painting process. Okay, I'll switch to my presentation. So after Katia showed the ASU, I'm going to show how we converted the same character to work for a new game and new genre. Here's a bit of an overview of the topics I'll be covering. I'll start with a bit of history about where we started to contextualize everything, and then get more into the craft. I'll cover the importance of working closely with different disciplines, as well as all the kind of steps we took to go from the early iterations to the final result. I'll also touch a bit on the steps we took to scale up production to account for things like skins, and then just go into some lessons I learned from this project that hopefully you'll find interesting. So yeah, the task at hand, adapting the lead character to a fighting game. We really had to preserve the spirit of the original while bringing this character to a brand new audience who might not be familiar with the IP. So it was important to us that we identified and conveyed the essence of the character and conveyed the tropes very clearly, since fighting games especially are really reliant on recognizable tropes. This task demanded a degree of willingness to experiment visually and be comfortable in a more ambiguous space, as the team was still experimenting with gameplay and art styles around this time. And those two things were much more closely entwined than I'd realized initially coming onto the project. This was the game that we showed in 2019, the initial kind of reveal. This screenshot is what all players knew of Project L when the game was first announced. It looks quite different to where we are now. At the time, the team, we were interested in exploring these kind of big, chunky silhouettes, and for the rendering style, for the characters, a hybrid between hand-painted and PBR materials, combined with these really beautiful hand-painted backgrounds and hand-drawn cartoony effects. But this art style was actually made to serve a different kind of gameplay. Back in 2019, the game was a heavier, more slower paced and methodical Street Fighter style 1v1 fighting game. That means the characters are bigger on screen and they demand kind of a ton of visual presence to read correctly. After that, the team decided to go in a new direction for Tag Fighter. This means gameplay was much faster, with a ton of visual chaos that was going to be on screen because you have potentially 4 characters all visible at once. Combat is also in Tag Fighters less grounded both thematically and literally. Characters are jumping around a lot, and they're overall lighter, not as heavy. Combos longer, and the gameplay is more closer to an anime fighter such as Guilty Gear or Marvel vs. Capcom. Characters also had to be quite a bit smaller on screen. This gameplay transition raised a lot of questions about the art and how we'd approach it. So getting into some early explorations that I did when I first joined the team. For the art refresh, we just decided to begin with very small steps. The character art team, we made a new take on Darius and Ahri, where we took the existing models that you saw in 2019 and tried to kind of plus them with using our own kind of artistic instincts at first. So for Ahri, I really wanted to get her feeling more like a mage, less of a physical fighter, just more emphasis on magic. I wanted her to feel lighter on her feet, and that would complement her more faster and chaotic gameplay style. I ended up elongating the legs quite a lot from the 2019 version and trying to bring more emphasis on silhouette, like bigger sleeves, bigger shoulders, longer hair, and more obvious ears. I wanted to feel more like Bastian rather than a human in wearing like a fox ear cosplay. These costume variants here worked with some of the amazing concept artists, and we kind of explored how she would express her power visually. I found that doing these kind of posed early explorations in ZBrush were a really good way to build confidence, camaraderie, and trust with the team, especially when you're new to a project. Quick ZBrush renders with color, you can do it without committing to kind of a full game art pipeline or getting into the weeds about how you're going to do the pipeline. And you can focus solely on just look development and just kind of excite the team. Moving out ZBrush, we pretty quickly wanted to start putting things in game. So this is the new kind of maquettes we made of Darius and Ahri compared to the 2019 versions. And I think the team quite like to see things in context as much as possible. So being able to quickly put things in game was really good for us. So during those early experiments, the creative direction was still a work in progress. And then eventually the new decision was made to go in this bold new direction, explored by our artists, and straight up wanted cel shading, outline, super graphic style. My past experience was always in more either realistic rendering or stylized PBR, or even a little bit of hand painting. I'd seen things like the Guilty Gear GDC talk, and I was blown away by it. But I think part of me had written it off as something I'd never personally get to do, or really even know how to do, because the technique seemed very difficult and esoteric at the time. It seemed very out of my wheelhouse, and I was a bit intimidated by the spell change. Here's some of our early. This is my first test that I did for kind of based on some of these earlier sketches. ZBrush was comfortable to me and familiar. So, and because of the non-photorealistic shader options for the matte caps, that was just a really good artist-friendly way to just go in and start trying to execute this and visualize it somehow. This was a different Ahri model I made for a figure. So to kind of build my own confidence and understanding of cel shading, I just took this model and applied cel shading and toon outlines to it. This result got quite a good reception from the team, but in terms of the rendering style, but of course the modeling style and the aesthetic was completely different. And that was still something I was trying to understand. The next really big elephant in the room was how to actually look dev these things in somewhat of a real-time situation. These videos. This was the previous model that I showed you, put in Maya with using the kind of inbuilt toon rendering and outline options. We quickly learned there was a lot of challenges to this. The sculpts we had, they'd been built to be seen as fully rendered, fully shaded 3D characters. This means that for a fighting game, you tend to add extra volume and thickness to make characters readable. But with cel shading and outlines, suddenly this modeling style we had looked way too bulky, and it ended up undermining my goals to have a more lighter and elegant character. The Star Guardian version was kind of a good example to me of how having thinner limbs and more thin modeling style in general tends to work much better with cel shading than with realistic or PBR rendering. Another experiment I tried on this video was having kind of a softer fall off to try and make this modeling style work. But it presented a lot of major issues with how to control the shading on the face. And in general, this kind of shading style really just looks like a cheap filter rather than something that was created for this shading style. So another test render of this kind of line of thinking. The major lesson I learned from this phase was always look dev your work in the intended shading style as quickly as possible. Otherwise, it can actually completely change how you might want to model things. It wasn't as simple as just slapping a cel shader on existing models. We really had to, at this point, just decide to throw away everything and start from scratch. So here was our new concept art. We really wanted to honor this awesome dynamic art style and achieve this combination of anime and American comic book style. I think what makes this really great is the super exaggerated and sharp angularity to everything. And I struggled with this modeling style because I think I naturally tend to round and soften things because that's my personal aesthetic and personal kind of thing that I fall back on. So doing this kind of very almost crude modeling was not intuitive to me. So that was definitely part of the challenge. After that, after getting the concepts, we went into new 3D explorations. From the previous final Ahri, just throw it away and start again with a brand new model, low poly. We threw it out and start from scratch. This intention, I tried to be as accurate to the concept as possible, kind of building things out of very simple low poly shapes and then overlaying it over a concept art to try and get the proportions accurate. After that, I kind of reverse engineer it from this back into a riggable pose, just using ZBrush. And here you can see this is the new proxy on the right compared to the old model. At this point, there was a desire on the team to actually reuse the existing animation and gameplay kit that had been built for her already. So that was quite a limitation on the artwork in a way, because at this point, we still wanted to conform the skeleton to work with those old animations. So these are the two models in game. This is retargeted animation. This is the old previous characters animations put on this new proxy, really simple proxy model. Keep playing it here. This retargeting step has a few upsides and downsides that I'll try and cover briefly. The upside is that you can see the new model in context of the current game just really quickly. You can play it, you can run around as it, and you can see the move set. I think it's a good way to get buy-in from a lot of different disciplines quite quickly to show, oh, we're making good progress, and oh wow, it's playable already. It's more impressive than just seeing things in Maya. Another upside is you can spot things that aren't working in the proportions by seeing it in its real context that would be difficult to spot otherwise. You can also test it out against other characters to check scale. At some point, we had this one against Darius, and it's tricky to gauge the heights of the two characters because Darius is quite hunched in his gameplay pose. So being able to see them with the in-game idle and animations was really important for this game in particular to solve scale. For the downside of the retarget process here, it's not always 100% accurate transfer. It's not really a totally accurate representation of the new model. Some proportions can get distorted. So just you can keep that in mind, as it's not always completely representative. Another downside is showing this kind of work to the team can be scary, because essentially if sometimes if non-art disciplines see this stuff, people are going to be worried, right? That like, why are you guys doing this model? Like, why does this model look so much worse than the new model? And if they see it in games, people might think, oh, this is further along than what we thought. So yeah, we found it helpful to kind of keep these type of videos just to people who had the most context on it. Here's some of our iteration process. After getting this in game, we had concept artists and character team review. This was a lot of draw overs and comparisons to the concept art. In this example here, you can see all the torso was much too short compared to the concept, and that's something that's really difficult to tell just being in Maya and being in the bind pose. So having these kind of paint overs of the character actually in game was really invaluable. This is Ahri next to Darius. They look quite weird together, and one thing was, yeah, his hands are as big as her entire torso, and it's quite strange because Darius was the male character we were doing, and you kind of started to think of them, oh, is he the average male compared to the average female? When really we should probably have done Yasuo at the same time to kind of have a truly average, but these were the characters that the gameplay team wanted to focus on at the time. So yeah. So some of our new concept art, I'll give you a minute to look at these. So eventually the decision was made to reboot the animations as well as the character model. These concepts show this kind of really fluid dancer-like mage that was light on her feet. Everyone really was excited by these. So these are new process we did based on those concept art on the post tests. These were done by our animators to capture the spirit of those movement studies. We use a mix of directly recreating the drawings combined with the animators' own ideas. The goal of this step was to check the proportions and silhouette with these new poses and reframe everything into a new context. For example, during this step, we made some adjustments that were only possible because of these tests. For example, that was the hair braid conflicting with the tail. We decided to go longer on the tail and shorter on the braid. It was still important for me to have her hair visible from game cam, because that was an aspect of the previous model that I thought wasn't delivering quite as well as it could have done. For the tail, the tail scale was very difficult to get right without seeing it posed. I would say this goes for any kind of long trailing costume element like capes. When it needs to actually twist around and deform, especially when you're seeing it from a compressed 2D camera, you end up needing to compensate quite a lot. And this tail ended up 1.5 times bigger, which is quite a big difference. Some more videos of these new post tests in game compared to the 2019 Ahri and the kind of new proxy version of Darius. It was really good to see these new poses, and I think it was quite a big difference compared to the retargeted ones because these were made specifically for this new aesthetic. After this, we went into building a more higher fidelity version of this character. This is the blockout stage of development here. This model was going to have soft skinning. The mesh, it's very simply just built in Maya and Photoshop. At this point, all my adjustments to the proxy have been done in Maya, because moving back and forth between ZBrush for this project was not really very efficient. we needed to make a lot of changes very quickly. Here are some the early changes on the right here, where going back and forth to ZBrush would have slowed us down more than we wanted. So, for example, on the metacarpals here on the knuckles, just being able to just adjust that right in Maya without having to go back to a high poly and then maintain two models was very useful. Also about preferences, so kind of limb orientations. I've not really ever worked with tech artists who had the exact same preferences on T-pose, A-pose, or how curved the limbs can be, or how tilted the hips can be. There's not really any right answer, and it depends on the tech artist preference, and I think it also depends on the larger context of the game itself and how the character is going to be seen. At the same time, I was working on a high poly version of this. My intent here was to incorporate a traditional high to low baking pipeline for the textures. Plus that in a decent place. So on the left is a piece I created in ZBrush. The right is also a ZBrush render also, but with a non-photorealistic rendering. Creating this type of render definitely had benefits and drawbacks too. The benefit was showing these kind of highly polished renders was good for team morale, and especially non-art departments like to see these kind of renders. The drawback was this high poly didn't end up being useful to me in this workflow. It was actually a hindrance. Because our project relied on such rapid iteration, going back and forth between a detailed high poly and then managing the low res at the same time was just the antithesis to moving quickly. Even after this high poly, there were still additional feedback points that were just much faster to accomplish working solely in Maya. I kind of ended up doing everything twice by trying to force a workflow that I was comfortable with on a project where it wasn't really the best decision. Into our first material look dev. This is the first final Ahri that I put into a level. For the textures here, I was really trying to go for this kind of Copic marker type soft painted feeling to it. There's also quite a bit more of 3D shading, like soft gradients, AO bake, normal maps, and ambient occlusion. I was trying to do some material definition on the hair and on some of the metals to kind of incorporate a bit of a PBR-like feel, and also these kind of soft, sketchy lines. For this, this was the first version of the face texture. At this point, Arcane Season 1 was still in development, so I was just really inspired by the Arcane artists, and this is me trying to add a little bit of kind of a brushstroke element to the textures. These are our more additional post tests from that model. These taught us a lot about what was working well and what needed improvement. We really liked the silhouettes the model could achieve, but there was still a lot of deformation issues here that I'll cover a little bit here. During those animation tests, our tech art department was doing more polished rigging, and we found a lot of issues. For example, in the finger topology here, we were iterating on that quite often to make nice, clean deformations, the exact orientation of the arms, and how best to avoid clipping situations, like dealing with this giant mass of hair clipping into the neck. At one point during these tests as well, I suggested we go from flat shoes to heels because it would really work better with skins in the way that that we didn't have to deal with as bad as foot and ankle deformations, and having varying heights on different skins would not have worked for a fighting game with the hitbox concerns. For the face here, I actually learned a lot about topology here that I did not know. We used the Ahri face topology and the skin weights as a basis to transfer to other characters by using a second UV channel to transfer the skin weights. Because of how important this was, we spent quite a few rounds of feedback iterating on the exact deformations of the lips and eyes, making sure the loops all lined up perfectly. This was something I had not really gone into depth on personally. All my previous professional work with heads used in-house topology or pre-made heads that belong to the studio rather than just starting from scratch. And that's kind of standard practice for most studios. I'd also never professionally worked on a game that had a lot of close-ups where it was really dependent on these clean deformations. And on my own personal projects, I could just pose the face however I wanted in ZBrush and didn't really worry about having this kind of very clean topology. So this was actually a skill I didn't really get to use until this point so far into my career, which is not really what I expected when, learning how to do face topology as a student. And then this is that previous model you saw in game with new animations. This was not working for us. So you can see, if you compare this more painterly Ahri to the Jinx on the right, the flat Jinx just works so much better for the scale of the characters, and the kind of more simple detail level just worked so much better for a tag game. So for this Ahri, we needed to make her as bold and graphic. With this new direction and the model feedback coming in, it didn't make sense anymore to maintain a high to low poly workflow anymore. So I moved away from ZBrush completely and the bake pipeline, which is the most familiar way of building characters to everyone here. Some of the advantages of that, which I talked about a bit, was not having to worry about maintaining two models, and allowed us to be much more agile. I could respond to all that tech art and animation feedback without having to go back to a high res model and worry about maintaining parity. It was also a bit scary to me to work this way because the high to low baking pipeline was everything that I knew. When I started out my career in game art, the normal maps were just the new hotness, and it was seen as absolutely essential. I couldn't really imagine taking on a job that didn't use that kind of high to low baking workflow. The idea of modeling only in Maya was considered a bit old school and looked down on as a bit out of date. So working on this project really changed my mind about that. And then this is how we went from that first version of the textures to the current one. This was where, after throwing away the pipeline I knew, I also threw away all the hand painted textures. So you can see the textures we have now on the right compared to the old ones. All the brushstroke and detail is gone. This was quite painful for me because I like the aesthetic of brushstrokes and detail. The idea of just having a flat paint bucket texture was quite uncomfortable to me, and I was not really convinced that it was going to look good. But when we tested this actually in game, as a player would see it, the completely flat textures are much more readable in all the chaos of gameplay. Seeing this rendering style and texture style in the proper context against the hand painted backgrounds, sorry, the bold and flat look was just working much better. Let this play up. Here's some more views of the Ahri we showed at Evo. This is a few close-up shots and just orthos of the model and the flat textures. And here's a comparison of the first version, the 1.0 version to the 1.1 version. Direct comparison between the more painterly style versus the graphic style. This was, even though it was painful for me at first, I just had to trust in the art direction and trust in the team's positive feedback that this was the right direction. Here's some breakdowns. I'll go a little bit into the craft here, but I'll try and keep it quite light. Instead of the hand-painted diffuse, most of the artistry and fun of building these characters was expressed in other ways. One technique we do is custom vertex normals on all of the characters' heads. This was definitely a journey, and I went through a lot of iterations on this character, and it ended up being a very collaborative process where we would pool our knowledge and problem solve together. The principle behind this is to control how the mesh is shading based on cutting out these shadow shapes here in the topology. You can see how the conventionally shaded face looks okay in grayscale. Once you have the flat textures and you're reading it as a cel shaded character, the face shading just looks very strange without customizing it. It's blobby and imprecise. So here's a few GIFs to kind of show how we control the vertex normals to control the exact shapes of the shadow and the speed at which the light is kind of allowed to transition across the face before flipping to these different shadows. The right hand side image here is kind of a cleaned up version of the left, where one of our awesome artist Killian was helping me learn a bit more about how to do this in the right way. This is actually removing the Y direction from the vertex normals to improve this transition of shadows. And here's the final topology for the face. These are the different shadow groups that are cut out here. So this kind of illustrates the principle of where we picked these shadow groups based on looking at a lot of anime. A bit more into the textures. This is the fun part of the process for me, for these characters. Our hand painting, kind of similar to the gradient maps Katia was showing, is all in grayscale. So in other games where you might use normal maps or bakes, we actually just paint the ambient inclusion by hand. And we took a lot of influence from League textures in the way that we have kind of a top-down lighting approach to the characters. It ends up being where our cel-shaded characters aren't quite as dynamic, but they work better for the vast majority of situations because we don't move our dynamic lights quite as much as some other cel-shaded games. So painting a top-down lighting works well for the vast majority of situations. Also, trying to getting all these kind of angular shapes, I think, has a bit of a distinction from other cel-shaded games, and it's just really fun to paint these textures. Highlights are approached the same way. Instead of a procedural specular, these are hand-painted and layered on with a shader. Another fun part of this process is the characters are made quite optimally. As an artist, I get a lot of joy out of painting textures, but the game dev part of me really likes making a really efficient substance template and having everything very methodical. From these UVs, you can see here, we cut out a lot of the shells and straighten the edges more aggressively than you might do for the pipelines. Our texture budgets for our champs often end up below 50 megs, as we don't have a lot of expensive textures like normal maps or 32-bit alpha that other games would. With our diffuse textures being so flat and with these squared off shells, you can actually downscale them really low to even 256 or 128 or lower without any perceived quality drop, because the detail is all in these AO and highlights. It's a bit about how we make chromas. This is another really fun part of the pipeline. This is kind of the reward at the end of the more technical process. We use substance here, which was invaluable to manage all of these layers within just one scene, all of these colors. We tried a procedurally coloring in Unreal approach in the past where we do it all in engine, but because of the complexity of our costumes and especially of skins, the best method was just hand authoring textures in substance and colors. Here's like a bit of a composite image, a GIF here that I put together that shows how base color, shadow color, and ambient occlusion composite together to make the shaded character. we have super direct control over the shadow and highlight colors, and we just straight up use a replace blending mode instead of multiply. This allows us just complete freedom to make more rich and interesting color palettes that would be impossible if you were just restricted to using a multiply blend mode. And here's the result we showed at EVO 2023. We revealed the updated look to players. Some of us artists, and I think especially me, I was nervous about the reaction, and we all feel self-conscious about the art we make, but the reaction from players at EVO was quite reassuring that we were going along the right path. There was always a few people that missed the 2019 style, which is fine. There was nothing wrong with the style, but for this game, we were quite confident in this direction, and players seemed to like it as well. I dislike this animation. It's good. Here's one of the in-game cinematics. Seeing the final shot come together with lighting, effects, and voice work was a really awesome moment. It really felt like everything's coming together at last after a lot of uncertainty and a few sleepless nights for me. That I was worrying that about delivering a new style that I hadn't had any experience in. Scaling up the project. A little bit about skins. Well, the character art team was focused on pushing the style as far as we could, always aspiring to reach quality levels set by other amazing developers like Arc System Works. We did have an oversight where it came to a major aspect of the game, which was scaling up to make skins. Our character art process had to be easy to understand for vendors, and our documentation and style guides clear enough to be translated into multiple languages. Thankfully, we had experienced developers on the team who had a lot of experience working on live games such as Paragon, Overwatch, League, and Valorant. Those team members had a wealth of information and knowledge about what worked and what didn't work for scaling up the skins. Something to be wary of was having actually too much fidelity in the rigs and character models. Instead of hand painting every piece of cloth, we rely on physics simulation, which is its own challenge. For example, anything with skirts is tricky, and the tech artist did a really good job fine-tuning the cloth to work purely on simulation with no animation on the skirt. We also make base anatomy versions of the champs, similar to what Katia showed for the League Ahri. These get rigged and passed to vendors. The base bodies act as templates, and you can essentially just dress them up for a skin. The internal team, we handle the more kind of subjective work like anatomy and faces. During the champ development pipeline, we also get a certain degree of shareability between champion bodies. But one aspect I'm quite proud of with the team is that all our female characters are unique and they don't share one body and silhouette. Everything's handmade and tuned for each champion. We're not just dressing up the same doll. And finally, some lessons I learned on this project. Expect the unexpected. Everything you know about the industry standard pipeline can be thrown out depending on the project. Be flexible and never assume you know everything. There's always unconventional ways to approach a task that you might not have known before. Art serves gameplay. Our foremost job as game artists is to complement gameplay and always be thinking about player experience. We're here to make an awesome game and not a movie or portfolio piece. So as a 3D artist as well, you often have to let go of your own aesthetic taste and follow the direction of what's best for this game. And also be willing to acknowledge when something you did isn't working and be open to pivoting. Be careful of forcing a solution that might not be the right one just because that's all you know. Stay humble, letting go of the mentality of this is the right way to make characters. From everything from software we use to what a T-pose should look like, how the topology should be, or how to do textures. A lot of things are just out of your control and you can't really force others to work the way you want to work. So just being flexible and humble was a big lesson here. Creativity and limitations. Sometimes limitations actually unlock us to do our best work and force us to think of more unconventional solutions to problems. Completion, not perfection. This one was hard for me. While we're always perfectionists in our own work, being a perfectionist as part of a game team can be quite destructive. It can make you a bit bitter when other people might not follow your subjective standards, and it can make you kind of be a bit of a negative influence rather than a voice that lifts everyone up and moves everyone forward together. And finally, trust the team. No matter how much you think you know personally, there's always someone with more knowledge than you as an artist and a developer. There were many moments early on where I felt really out of my depth, and it was my teammates who kind of talked me through it. Sometimes tasks can seem really daunting or overwhelming, but I found that being open to solving these problems together and just having faith that eventually things are going to be fine, it's going to work out all right, and that's just going to save you a lot of stress and make you a better person to work with. And that is everything. Thank you guys. Sorry for talking so long.
You can't hear it, but they're definitely clapping at home. We tried to ship everyone a mic before the stream went on, but you know, shipping's really tough. That many microphones. Okay, y'all did amazing. Thank you so much for this presentation, and I do want to say thank you to everyone in chat. We have a whole series of questions. I have logged them all here. I did also put a couple of different comments. I do want to say, Teresa, it was great learning about everybody's main, but Teresa said that their main is every champ with the skin that Katia made. So anytime Katia makes a skin, Teresa, that's their main. So keep that in mind.
That's so funny. Well, Teresa used to be at Riot. I hired her as an intern back in 2020, and she's like one of the most amazing artists I've ever worked with. So I love her, and I appreciate her compliment.
Also, lots of varying things. I'm sure you get people asking for Riot buddies a lot. I know a lot of you in chat are asking for Riot buddies. Look, we have other questions that we do need to get into. Like, okay, as a general, a lot of people ask this question of just kind of general advice of kind of breaking into, they say the industry, but also kind of, I think just kind of some insight on your general career path. Any tips that you have for anybody, maybe just getting out of school and then trying to get into that first job, or what rungs they need to climb up on the ladder in order to get to kind of where you're at.
Blair, do you want to go first? Do you want to me go first?
I was reading the chat comments and I've seen my co-workers and getting really embarrassed. Sorry, do you mind summarizing the question
again? just like general tips for somebody starting out in this industry, if you have any, like what was something that you wish that you had known when you were first starting?
I think for me, being diverse about which styles and what kind of models to work on, and be willing to kind of try everything and not pigeonhole yourself too early. And also don't underestimate the power of kind of generalist skills as well, that sometimes we focus so much on being like, I'm the creature guy or whatever, or like, I'm like this person, that having those generalist skills just makes you a better game developer and I think that's just a good thing to keep training those muscles on.
Yeah, I would say starting out, definitely focus on what your main discipline is, but learn about other disciplines. Like being a generalist, I think is amazing. I had the opportunity to work in a studio where I got to work with a lot of different disciplines, and then with Riot, I get to work with a lot of different disciplines, and it's amazing because I have a better understanding of what they expect from me. And so I have a better understanding of what I need to provide for them. But at the very beginning, I think really being a part of the community does help. I see a lot of artists that end up like working with us in the future. I tend to meet them in the community. They're already like League fans, like they already play the game. They make fan art or they make art that is very similar, but like they're on our radar. And I used to be a hiring manager, so I used to like always keep tabs of everybody. And so anytime we had an open position, I was like, cool, these are the people that I can look at for these specific positions. But honestly, being kind, working your butt off to make sure that your portfolio fits the studio that you want to apply to. Because a lot of the time, I do see people who apply to us or other studios, and their portfolio doesn't show that they actually have the skill, like the specific skills to do that job. Like you, if you're learning specifically realism, but then you wanted to go work on League of Legends, and this is your first position, it's going to be harder to be able to adjust your styles. If you're a senior, a lot of the time seniors have they've been in the industry long enough, they're able to jump around a bit easier, be able to copy styles easier. So it's like there's a better chance for them to have a more diverse portfolio applying for a game that they don't have art for. But I think at the beginning is like being a part of the community, talking to people, really working on your portfolio, making sure that your portfolio has the skill sets that you need to be able to do the job, or like the potential to be able to do the job.
Okay, so for everyone out there that is an artist but also is working on becoming challenger, there you go. You have to make it all the way. Jonathan Amador from YouTube is asking specifically when you're talking about community, what communities are you talking about? The community of the IP, the art community as a whole? Like what community are you kind of alluding to?
Community as a whole, like back in the day, we had Polycount, so it's like I know a lot of artists from Polycount, and we all kind of like migrated to Facebook, and then I think the Twitter. I feel like a lot of the art community that is interested in Riot tends to be on Twitter or now Blue Sky, as well as some Discords. So it's like making friends there, asking questions, sharing people's work, like interacting with each other, like Twitter, which like mixed feelings. Is probably one of the better places to be on, or Blue Sky.
Awesome. And then to answer your question, active motion pictures, we are alternating between Twitch and YouTube. We have a very large list of questions, so it's just kind of populated all together. Speaking of questions, Rosie Scribbles asks, I noticed Ahri's hair clips through the tails in the pose for the mesh. Does it not matter if it clips through like that, or is it dependent on the particular mesh / situation?
For ASU, it doesn't matter. Like tech art can build around that, and animation can work with that. Like it's fine if things are clipping in there because that's a bind pose. They're going to pose. The animator is going to pose it however they need to.
Very cool. And then Nick Simmons had a question about when and how y'all decide to either sculpt and bake AO lighting from high poly as a base, or just go at it with 100% paint workflows. Thank you for the presentation, they say.
So back on League, I used to just do whatever I felt like. I also used to be the character lead on the team, so I feel like that's okay. Back then, now it's like it depends on how the team is handling things. But back then, honestly, you had a time box. You needed to make sure that you're able to do everything in the time box, and you need to make sure to unblock the other disciplines. So that way, it's like doing a sculpt. You don't have a month to do a sculpt, not on Skins team. You might have that time to do it on like the gameplay, the champion team, because their time boxes are slightly different. But for Skins, it's like it's a lot more go, go, go. So at that time, it's like you can spend a week on a sculpt, but that's probably about as much as you can get unless you're like a really fast low poly modeler and texture, but usually you want to spend a lot of your time texturing. So it really depended on the person, or if they wanted to do some learnings, they can talk to the team and the producer and the lead and be like, hey, I would love to if I can like add an extra week or something so I can really focus on sculpting for this character kind of thing. But usually back then it was up to the character artist to use their best judgment.
David McMullen had a question. Oh, sorry. On projects like these, how much leeway do you have as an artist to move away from the pipeline? If you think you know a better / more efficient way of doing something, how do you communicate it? I think that can be a question for both of you about breaking the pipeline if you do it. When do you break the rules?
As early as possible, really. I think when you're in that more pre-production phase, that's the best time to just bring everything to the table. And so many people on the team had just really unique ways of doing stuff. We would try all sorts of weird things, and if it didn't work, it didn't matter. And it was just the earliest possible, I think, for us was a good time to pool knowledge.
And do you echo that sentiment, Katia? Do you think that, like, if you are gonna kind of bring something up, it's better to do it earlier than later or midway through?
Because there's different solutions for a lot of different things, and having people with a lot of different experiences, like they can bring something new to the table that nobody else might have thought of.
So active motion picture, going back to you, don't worry, we didn't forget about you, active. From concept to final approval, how much time are you usually given to complete? Well, they're asking specifically how much time you were given to complete Ahri as the fighting character. And then I just want to add on in general, from kind of beginning to end, without having to change it. Obviously, you had a huge change from 2019 to current, but without having to do that too much, how much time are you usually given for any given character, and then specifically with Ahri?
Oh, for the 2x champs, usually about usually 2 to 3 months. But it's also a little bit tricky because so much of that time is spent on iteration with different departments where you're not actually sat down working on the model, but you're just kind of involved in all these discussions and other aspects rather than just, being isolated working on the model. A lot of time is spent just reviewing it and sometimes letting it sit and then making decisions.
Very cool. Jin the Trash Bin. Y'all, just a quick side note. Some of y'all have some great names. I'm just having a great time reading all of these. But Jin the Trash Bin asks, resources, websites, books, anything that inspires y'all. What do you guys have, any suggestions or recommendations?
Joan of Arc tutorial.
It's a very old tutorial, but it's inspiring.
Kata's tutorials on ArtStation.
Oh, thank you. They're so old.
His tutorials on ArtStation.
I actually used to watch Noman's workshop tutorials all the time back in the day when I was in college. Like, I think Bulgarov's was one of them. And I would just continuously, I would like replay them just for the inspiration. But I used to go to sites. It's like back in the day we didn't have ArtStation. We had like DeviantArt and then CG Hub, and I'd always be on those. We had Polycount, so like actual game art threads are fantastic. I don't think they get as used as much. I think it's kind of moved over to socials and like Discord now, and the community is so huge. But literally anywhere. But yeah, usually my favorite artists are people who like inspire me the most, or new artists that I'll find on ArtStation where I'm like, oh, who made this? Never heard of them, but they're amazing. And I'm like digging through everything, saving everything. Like I always have a peer ref whenever I'm working on a character. I have a peer ref of like all the references I need in order to make the character, and then like inspirational work of other people who I'm like, yes, I want it to look kind of like this, or I just like see like how the skin sparkles or something, and then I just have that there to motivate me.
Yeah, ArtStation breakdowns are so good. Like they're probably my favorite learning resource now. If people are kind enough to add all those breakdown images on their ArtStation posts.
Mm-hmm.
But my favorite Gnome on DVD was the cracked pillar. How to make the cracked concrete pillar in ZBrush.
Oh. Yes, I think most people from our age group had to do that.
Yeah, it's hard explaining what a DVD is sometimes. Um, I, was a sparkle skin, was that a Twilight reference, or did you actually have to look up into sparkle skin one time?
Oh,
You were like, I
no,
need to
just
look
like
into
how
sparkle skin.
nice light can hit like a PBR kind of skin. It has like this nice
Oh, okay.
lighting to it where it just, I don't know, feels like morning dew.
I thought you were just trying to plug in
I
Twilight as
mean,
much as
I
you can. Like that's
can.
a
I
totally
definitely,
fine.
I grew up during that era.
Okay. We have another great name here, Stylized Ramen.
Love it.
Love it. Is it better to use 3D coat instead of Substance Painter for hand painted textures?
I'm gonna
And then what is your kind of thoughts on this? Because I think you both did a little bit of hand painted textures. So approach it and thoughts.
I strongly suggest 3D coat, but I have never forced myself to paint very long in Substance. I rather just do it in 3D coat and import them. I don't find the tools as good and painterly as 3D coat, and with 3D coat, you can jump between Photoshop very easily. So that's just super helpful with how I can do like yeah either projections or like jumping the maps back and forth, and the tools just feel I don't know smoother to me. So I'm very biased towards 3D coat.
Yeah, I
And you,
think
Blair?
3D coat it seems like the best option for doing hand painting. I think Substance is fantastic when you're handling a lot of colors. For example, when we do chromas, there's a, there's a lot of chromas to handle, and being able to have everything very um, organized and as kind of drag and drop and procedural as possible. I think Substance is fantastic for that when you're managing more of a template rather than going in and doing very nuanced brushstroke type work.
Mhm.
Bruce Lee asks, how do you figure out how to texture specific material? How do you stylize it to match the League of Legends style?
Um, for materials, I just gotten so used to it. Usually, you can reference something that already exists in game, but sometimes you'll get like materials that just don't because new thematics. I like to look up real world references and see how they interact, and just try to emulate it, but keep it stylized. Like a lot of people do those nice either sphere or cube material studies. Those are fantastic. So I definitely recommend people to like take some time, do some of those. And our style, like we're hand painted, but we're different than something like WoW. And so it's like we handle materials in a slightly different way, the colors in a slightly different way. And so it's like just gaining a good understanding of the differences between different hand painted games or just different styles. Like you kind of start being able to understand. But a lot of the time, it's like referencing what is already in game and trying to um, create something based off of that. Like if I need to do wood, there's a billion woods that I can reference in game. Like, do I want like a bilge water kind of wood, or do I want like a nice warm woodsy kind of wood? Like, I'll go look that up and try to see if I can emulate it. Like, what colors are in there? Because it's never just like, oh, this is just brown. Like, there may be warm reds or like cool greens or cool like blues. So yeah, always have references.
References are the way to go. There was a question. Oh, here we go. James Quick Art, I think it's Quick. When creating a character for portfolio, are some styles better than others to demonstrate skills, or is it good to go for what is trending, aka Marvel Rivals?
Blair, do you want to answer that one?
I think having a bit of a range, if you can, is good. I think trending styles are good and they're often popular and desirable for a reason. Um, so I don't think there's anything wrong with pursuing trending styles, especially if it's something you personally like.
Mhm.
But I think it's nice to at least cover. It's hard to say, really, depending on your interest. But I tried to cover one thing that was just standard realistic rendering, just to kind of show that I could do it. But again, if that's not your area of interest, then maybe there's not even a reason to do that. I don't know. What do you think?
Definitely do what you love, because I find that really important. If you're looking for a job specifically and there are multiple studios that kind of have a similar style, like if you aim for that, you're gonna have a better chance of joining them. Um, but the thing is, like, every hiring manager is gonna be completely different. You never know what exactly they're looking for. They might literally want, like, one-to-one-to-one kind of style. Others can be like, "Oh, cool. I see you're using our style, but with different characters, and I can totally tell that you can do this if you're in-house." So it really also depends on the people, but I would say, um, have, like, male, female characters, maybe creatures if you're interested in creature work, um, being able to show different materials on those characters. So that way it's like maybe some are cloth, some leather, some metal. So it's like showing kind of a range of things. Definitely good anatomy within those. Um, I would like personally, I care also about like the highest quality. So I'd rather see like three really good portfolio pieces than like 10 and like seven of them being really mediocre. Like only put your best work in there because like the rest is fluff.
And between those three, it could. Oh, sorry, interrupted. Like
No,
if
go ahead,
those
go ahead.
three, if you did have three pieces, for example, they all illustrate and show different things. So it's not just repeating the same skills. Because if we've seen you can do this, oh, we don't really need to see it twice again. Like maybe those other two pieces is going to demonstrate either a different rendering style or different, very different subject matter.
Mhm.
And just as a quick aside, there are quite a few people that are very interested and are asking quite a series of questions of getting into Riot specifically. Um, Maybe to kind of have a little bit of a catch-all, can you kind of walk us a little bit about your portfolio with Riot, kind of your own general journey? Like we've been talking a lot about what you put in your portfolio and all that stuff. Did you have some like fan art stuff that had to do with Riot? Like what I guess specifically for Riot, what was your journey like, and then what advice, if any, do you have?
Blair, do you want to go or do you want me to go?
I can go. I had a fan art. I had a hand painted fan art that I did for one of the skins competitions in 2014. Um, so yeah, I think focusing your portfolio, yeah, very specifically on those games, and studying with as much resources as possible how to use that pipeline, demonstrate you can do that pipeline, and aim towards a specific project rather than just like general Riot, because all the projects and pipelines are quite different.
Yeah.
Did you echo that sentiment as well,
Yeah.
Katia?
We joined Riot forever ago, so it was a bit more of like it was always a little bit messy to get in the studios back in the day. Because I actually did like 2 art tests for Riot, and one didn't pass, which I was a little bit sad about because I thought I did a great job on her, and I ended up reworking her and posting her in my portfolio anyways. My second one, which I didn't love, passed, but the team ended up restructuring, and so, like, when I was in the middle of all my interviews, it ended up being, um, I wasn't able to join the team, and so we just kinda kept in contact for a while, and I just started, like, spamming art, which I was just doing, like, personal stuff first, and then I did, Marauder Soraka fan art, and, somebody from there reached out, said they really loved it, and they wanted me to, like, take a tour at Riot, and so that was amazing experience, and then I was working on, reworking base Tryndamere based on Paul Quant's concept for, I think, the statue that we have somewhere. And at that point, I started having conversations with the art director of the team, who was the art director that I was already like had the previous conversations with whenever I was in my interviews. And I ended up getting a tour. And so we were just, I got a chance to like see the campus, meet the artists, and I actually was able to join the team because they had an artist who ended up having to uh, move away for a time. And back then, it's like you had to work in studio. And so they needed somebody to help on Elemental's Lux. So it was like one of those, like, everything needs to get done now. And they ended up calling me. So I joined as a contractor for, I think, about 4 months and switched to full time. And that was like a wild process because it was one of those, like, a few weeks later, out of the blue, hey, would you be interested to work on this? And so that was a wild ride. But usually it's like, because like all of our teams do have different styles. It's like 2XKO has its own style, Valorant has its own style, League has its own style. You have to show that you can to demonstrate that you have those specific skills for those specific teams. So showing either fan art or just art that is within that similar style, that pipeline, having that, I think, would be very beneficial, but also like interacting in the communities, talking to the people who are already on the team, because it's like a lot of the time, a lot of the people that I end up working with on League, I actually did meet on Twitter because they're part of the like League of Legends and our community, and they would just make fan art, and you're just like, this person's too good not to hire. So, yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so Blair, there's a specific question from you from Howie Musica, which is Blair, you mentioned each champ is unique. Do you not use Gen Man assets that are already rigged, or is everything truly unique? Cheers. And thank you, Katia and Blair. They thank you both at the end. How kind.
We do use shared topology in some cases, but often we'll reshape it to the new character, and then oftentimes end up making edits to the topology specific to that character as well. Even on all the faces, female faces, there's because of how the shadow groups work, they're very specific to that character. So what works on one doesn't necessarily isn't specific enough to a different character. So they do end up being, but when you attach the head to the body, they end up being unique.
There's also another specific question, I think, for you, Katia, by Bearded Shepherd, asking if all tails are the same. I guess we're talking about Ahri here. If all tails are the same, why have an entire 1-to-1 ratio for the texture? I'm curious, or would that have caused stretching in the tileable scrolling materials if it was cropped to just one?
I read through some of those. Yeah. So her tails were set up so that way we can just reuse them on multiple skins. So it's not just her skin. There are 9, and there's 3 different ones, but for this specific skin, all the actual texture is literally the same, but it's set up so that way the next character artist, if they're making like a floofy-tailed Ahri, they can literally be like, oh, we'll just take these tails and repaint them, but we can at least create like 3 different variations if we need to. So that way they're set up for like they're future-proofing her. And then if we just like, I could have technically thrown it onto her base texture, but if I did that, that would create a lot of other issues, because it's like, even though for me, if I would have made enough room for it there, which it is pretty big, so it's like I don't really want it to be on the same UV sheet. The way that it's going to be set up in the system, other people, if they do need to put another UV map, there's just going to be a lot of stuff they're going to have to rename to make things work, and that's just a pain in the butt. So it's just going to be easier to have everything on another UV set. So that way, when making skins, it's like everything is set up clearly in the system, and you don't have to like make a bunch of different changes just because different textures or different UV sets.
Also for you, I believe this one is from Kyo Call. I'm sorry if I got that wrong, y'all. Are there any steps you take to try and harmonize the values after you apply gradient maps? I found I had to reassess my values after I changed the AO pass into color.
After I do my gradient maps, so there are times where I literally just paint in color, and then I realize that my values kind of go all over the place. I did that with Sentinel Irelia, and I had to literally just desaturate her and then fix that, because it was a bigger job. and fix all the values and then redo all the gradients. But usually I can just bring it into Photoshop and do the proof color thing where I just set it on gradient there and just fix things inside there because I can select the color and paint with it. But it really depends on like what you're specifically trying to fix, because doing something like median also does help me a lot because it does harmonize the pixels and makes things less contrasty. So there are different ways, and I have noticed that the median one does it does help me visually, because sometimes I'm like something feels off and I don't know what it is, and when I do that, um, it just blends things together better and makes things look a little bit cleaner because I do over render certain things or get too contrasted in certain areas.
When do you decide when to switch from the purely gradient workflow to going in and actually doing bits in color, or do you keep in gradient maps the whole time?
I so whatever I feel like, but I like to start the gradient maps early just so I can kind of see how they're looking, and then also so whenever I submit it into the system for my team, they're able to like already work with it in color. They don't have to imagine what the character would look like. But I try to force my stay in there as long as I can. With Ahri, I actually did most of the work in grayscale, and that's a much faster process for me because I'm not having to juggle color and trying to fix my values in color. I'm easily just like seeing grayscale, so it's easier to see my values and making sure that everything looks as correct as it can be.
So she
But
actually stayed grayscale right till the end almost.
almost, and then yeah, still have to do some painting on top and some like pushing and pulling, making sure the right forms are popping up, because it's like with the in-game camera, it's like the character's running around. You want to make sure you're highlighting the right features, which is why I always have like the running or had the running and the idle in there, because it's like that's usually what you see on screen all the time. So it's like you're gonna see whether the arm, like what part of the arm needs to be lit up, like is it a hunched over character so the back needs to be more lit than the front. So you get to kind of you make all those decisions. But I honestly go always with like whatever feels right.
Kind of just feeling it
Yeah,
out, seeing how you
one of
feel.
those artists.
Okay. Um, so Pokefeel has a very specific question, but I'm also going to open it up. Pokefeel asks, what do you intentionally try to avoid to prevent the model from looking bad in engine? And then they also ask, like, is there a certain mistake you notice from beginners that they make a lot? So I'd like to kind of open it up a little bit more. So the first question, which is, what do you intentionally try to avoid to prevent the model from looking bad in engine? And then I think just in general, what are beginner mistakes that you notice kind of happen a lot and how to avoid them?
The in-engine one, I think noise is a big one. So details getting so small that they just become aliased when the player is actually seeing it. So when you're zoomed in working on something, something might look fine, but if you're not considering the context of how players are gonna see it in
Mhm.
like the vast majority of the time, and try to scale details for that scale that people are actually going to see it at, and avoid things getting so tiny that it just becomes a little aliased line.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree. Like, um, spending too much time on something that doesn't matter overall. Like when somebody over focuses on something like the sole of a shoe, if you're not going to ever see the shoe, like you just you don't want to spend a lot of time on that. So you want to look at the overall picture and work on the areas that matter most. And it's like sometimes you'll see people who just add so many tries to something where it's like you don't need this shape. It doesn't even like it doesn't matter. So making those decisions, but that takes a lot of time to really get used to and understand like what works, what doesn't work, where you want to invest your time in.
So there you have it. If you've been spending 30 minutes on the sole of a shoe, that's too long. Another person asked, Yimmy06 asks, are most outfits sculpted or made in other softwares like Marvelous Designer? I think you were talking about using ZBrush earlier, but for outfits and stuff, what are you just using the same program, or are you alternating to a different one?
I don't think
We
I've ever.
use.
Oh,
Oh,
sorry. Go ahead.
sorry. Yeah. Yeah, I've not used Marvelous at this company, but I think we try and keep a consistent pipeline. So whatever pipeline we use for the body and the head, we would do the clothes and everything else the same way, just so everyone can open the files and you don't need to install all these different softwares, and try to just make it as simple as possible to open the files and know um, what's what.
Just make it a smoother process for everybody involved. Now, speaking of that, somebody else had asked how many artists, if you can kind of ballpark it, how many artists work on a given character at any given time?
Just for character models, or for the entire creation.
I think just the character models for this one. Do you have just somebody specific for the character model? And then I guess you can open it up, because I would assume you have somebody for the character model, somebody for the rigging, somebody putting it into
Yeah.
actual legends. So I guess just for the character model, and then we can dive into all of the pieces that would get Ahri from getting modeled into 2XKO or in
Yeah,
League.
we like to have one artist own the entire process, but sometimes we might have proxy models that were done earlier, and then if those are kind of already through a certain level of the pipeline, it might then make more sense to give that proxy model to maybe a newer artist and say, okay, now you take it from 10% to 100%. So we try and keep it all within one person, but sometimes that's not logistically possible because of how timelines work out.
Yeah, for League, you have champions like Kane, where you have 3 forms, and you're on a pod, and you need to stay within your time boxes. So sometimes you're either working with outsourced or other internal character artists that are taking one of the forms. Unlike legendary teams, it was a little bit easier because you had longer time boxes, so you can do secondary forms. But sometimes, yeah, whenever you have too much work, like sometimes time boxes just cut short. And at that point, you can talk to your lead or your producer and talk about getting help and assistance. And it's like, I've done that many times where it's like somebody's working on a character who has a lot of weapons. And so it's like, cool, we'll all just take one and do one to save you a day kind of thing. So it's like, however you can help, but generally it's like you want to have the character be owned by one person.
Very cool. Now, Adam E87 has a question to both of you. They specified that, so I'm asking the question to both of you. Beyond applying brute force discipline, what helps you spend time outside of your day job, working on your personal art, and developing yourself, especially as veterans such as yourself? And they wanted to give out a big thank you. So focusing on you, right? How do you kind of carve out that time and really make sure that you have time not only for your personal life but also your personal work? Do you still have time for your personal work, or is it kind of not so much as it used to be? I think it's just kind of the general question.
I think I try and be really specific about it. So if there's like one new workflow, or for example, I want to learn how to do cel shading in Blender, then that's kind of like the starting point to be um, okay, I'm going to start this brand new project with this specific goal. And if it's something I've never done before, I think it's more motivational for me because there's not as much pressure to then be like, well, uh, people liked that last thing I did. Now I have to um, like somehow do something better. It creates this like weird pressure on you. But I think if you go into a personal project with the goal of doing something you've never done before, then there's less standards and it's more fun, and there's not as much that pressure we put on ourselves.
Yeah. I agree. Like having something you're wanting to learn definitely helps. Like I know I get a lot more excited if I'm trying to learn something new. It has definitely been hard because just personal life, being busy. So I try not to have to like force myself to feel like I need to finish it, I need to post it, I need to show it. I try to look at it as I looked at art back in the day when I was like, cool, this is a sketchbook and gonna make a sketch. So it's like when I feel like it, I just open ZBrush and I go make like a half-ass bust for a few hours and then I never look at it again. But it was fun when I was making it. So I try to like have those kind of moments where I have like short bursts, fun things that I'm working on. Or if there is something like educational that I'm trying to learn, or like I'm trying to motivate myself to do like a full project because I just want to like push to check specific pipelines or to check if I can do something with specific speed, like all that kind of stuff motivates me, but that also, yes, depends if I have the time after work to be able to do that.
I have a question about the workflow as well. This is just a curious question for me personally. Um, Obviously, when you're working, there's a lot of stuff that you're doing. Sometimes it can be a little tedious. You're doing it over and over again, and your brain's kind of focused in on it. For me personally, when I'm working on something, and even just throughout the day, I like listening to music. I personally can listen to music with words, so I've been listening to Dochi lately. She's very fun. She's energetic. Kind of keeps me going. Some people don't do that at all. They don't listen to music at all. We have instructors here that get noise canceling headphones and just work that way. Zero music. Some people do just words. I know someone that listens to just movie soundtracks. When you're working, what, like, obviously you're working and you're 100% focused on your task, but your ambiance, is it like a TV show? Is it nothing? Does it just have to be like, cats meowing in the background or like dog bug? Like what is kind of like your overall work ambiance that you work with?
Our work ambiance is probably Slack messages. So
Ah, not wrong.
um,
Slack
yeah, notifications
notifications.
or Discord notifications. Um, I do want to listen to music or watch something, but for me, it's just impossible because someone will just want to talk about something and I'll just have to pause it
Mhm.
immediately. But on the rare times that I do get to do it, then I like watching those like 3 hour deep dive into the history of Neopets or things, those kind of YouTube videos.
Yeah, those are super fun.
Nice.
Oh, I forgot about Club Penguin. What did happen to it? Those are
That's
great.
great.
What about you, Katia?
Well, like mentioned earlier off here, I watch a lot of horror movies, so I literally just find the less crappiest one that kind of that doesn't sound like a 2 or 3 out of 10, like something maybe around like a 5 at least. And I'll just have that playing in the background. I'll rewatch a lot of the same ones I've seen before because I can't remember them anymore. And then I'll do audiobooks, but audiobooks are probably like my favorite because I'll 2x them and I'll just, because I'll buy so many sometimes, or I see that Audible has a bunch of free ones that I can just go through and I want to do them all. So literally just like speed run audiobooks while working. But that depends on like what part of the pipeline that I'm on. Like if I need to be problem solving something, everything's kind of on pause. I'm thinking, but if I'm doing something that I've done like a bazillion times, I'm just modeling, UVing, texturing. At that point, it's like I just have something on and just enjoying myself.
Awesome. And if you're in the chat and you have a very specific ambiance that you go, like Katia listening to slasher films while working on stuff, please let us know. Very interesting. Okay, back to it. We'll have a couple more questions and then we'll let you all go. We really appreciate your time. Thank you so much. Saori Oshiyama asks, I noticed that the Darius model has its feet tilted outside the model instead of flat on the ground. Is there a reason why that model is made like that? Very specific.
Yeah, the it's talking about the legs positioned like this starfish shape. We initially did it because
Yeah.
that's how they made Street Fighter models, and a lot of the times is because
Oh.
characters have really chunky legs. So this was kind of a byproduct of the older style where we had the very thick characters uh, same as with the Street Fighter characters, the thighs are so big that having them just the legs straight down, it just makes them a nightmare to work on, because it's just difficult to work on it. When you can't separate the legs, it's really a pain to work on it when the legs are clipping through each other. So Darius also has like very chunky armor on his legs. So we took Darius and then saw how they did it on Street Fighter and thought, okay, this would make working on Darius much easier to have, so we don't have to deal with the thigh armor clipping into itself. But then on other characters, there's no need for it. So it kind of became a convention we established for Darius. But then on most champions, we don't even. It's not really a requirement, but sometimes one character you do early on defines the entire pipeline, and sometimes maybe not for the better. It's difficult to work on characters in that pose. I will say it is difficult to get the sense of weight, and there's just the gesture of it is difficult. I think working on the legs straight down is much easier.
Mm-hmm.
And you got to be careful with Darius right now. Giving him thick thighs, you put him in a difficult position, because right now, what that Welcome to Noxus or Return to Noxus trailer came out, and the thirst trap Darius memes are out of control. So any chance I think that's what was happening. Sarah was just asking about Darius' size. That's what was going on. Statchmo and a couple of other people were asking specifically. First, they wanted to compliment you both being amazing artists, fantastic stylized characters, being pillars in the community, and they wanted to thank you for that and thank you for the presentation. But they were also curious, as a whole, some of your favorite artists, and then in kind of a more macro, some of your favorite stylized artists, if you have any.
Let's see. Now I've just been naming co-workers. Now I don't want to make anyone feel bad if I don't say. But wait, Katia, you go first.
Exclude people.
Yeah, I just want to say everyone I work with, I'm now I'm just I'm a big fan of them. I love the character.
You should just say Katia, and then Katia can say Blair, and then you guys, then everybody wins. Yeah, exactly. Sometimes it is. Oh, music for the right project. Somebody else was saying that they listen to podcasts. Very interesting. The times two on podcasts also works out really well. And then I guess the final thing that I had for y'all, of just kind of like a general takeaway in the scope of everything that's happening right now in the current climate, and just kind of staying focused, avoiding burnout. What is kind of a general advice for just anybody, not just a student or anybody right now, kind of in the industry and just kind of working through it mentally, kind of staying focused? What kind of advice do you have for those people right now?
Definitely rely on
either one.
Rely on those communities that hopefully are a part of, and don't I think not being isolated, and try and reach out, check on those people, check on your friends, kind of just anything to lift each other up, and don't get it's tricky. We have some better thoughts on other things to do.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's pretty good, right? Like making sure that you reach out to people, keeping the communication open, I think is something that
don't shut down
and kind of funnel it, So I think that's a good reminder.
And being honest and vulnerable with your friends, like telling them what's actually wrong. Like our industry is like all industries, where it's like you have a lot of different kind of people. And I know it can feel isolating, and sometimes you think you're going insane because you hear something. Like I've known so many artists that have like lost their confidence in their work because they thought they were bad artists because somebody at work said this. And a lot of the time, it's also just not true. So, like, talking to your friends, therapy is very helpful. But I honestly like industry stuff. Friend therapy is the best because they can actually talk to you and be honest with you. It's like, do you need to improve in these certain areas? Or are there like other issues that you're dealing with at work that are very unfortunate kind of thing. But having support systems, people who can like prop you up and make you feel better. If you're burnt out, sucks. Been there so many times. Sometimes it takes time to get out of it. Uh, Sometimes you just kind of brute force through it for a very long time until you are able to get out of it. But I know people get like really passionate and they want to work after work or they're forced to work after work. But if you're really passionate, like if you can cut it off, just cut it off because it will make you feel better if you can have a personal life and work on personal pieces. And then you'll actually be more thankful for it later. Like I'm one of those people that loves working after work. It's like a bad habit. But anytime I have to work after work, I'm like, I start feeling miserable because it's no longer a decision that I made. It's now a decision that is like I'm forced to do because of XYZ kind of things. Um, but anytime I'm like, cool, I'm going to wake up and I'm going to work on this tomorrow morning at the right time because this is what I should do because we planned specifically for an X amount of time. I don't need to rush this. I always feel a lot better because then I get to like have hobbies and have friends and have a life and get sleep. So like forcing yourself to have good habits, which is definitely hard, especially with COVID and the new lifestyle that we've developed working from home where you can't tell where work starts and ends at this point.
Yeah, it's much easier to overwork from home, I think, because the day doesn't end. It ends whenever you go to bed. Whereas like having the office structure, I think is better to kind of set boundaries.
Well, awesome. So then if people want to stay up to date with you and what either one of you are doing, where do they go? Do they just Google or do you have like a Instagram or an art station or a LinkedIn?
Do Twitter, though I also need to move to Blue Sky. But yeah, Twitter, ArtStation, or feel free to email me as well.
And you, Katia?
I think everywhere at this point, but I'm mostly on like Twitter and ArtStation, Insta, trying to get better about Blue Sky as more artists are floating over there.
Yeah, well, it's definitely. We're also on Blue Sky, so if you're looking for somebody to follow or check out, and let this be a quick reminder for everybody watching: don't ignore your mental health. Take some time for yourself. You know, if it feels like you're getting overwhelmed, if you feel like there's a lot going on, there's probably a lot going on, and it's okay to just take a second and breathe. So thank you all for that reminder. I think it's really important, especially in everything that's been going on. But also, thank you for this amazing presentation. Thank you for spending the evening with us. I know everyone in chat, please give us some emails, some clapping emails. Thank you to our presenters and taking the time to be here. We really, really appreciate it. And we hope to see you again, right? I mean, 2XKO ain't even out yet. So gonna have to do something when it comes out, right?
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, of course.
Thanks for having us.
It was so great. And if you at home have any questions about what Gnomon can do for you, go ahead and contact us at gnomon.edu. And you can also follow us on all of our socials, Gnomon_school. We thank you so much for being here. Make sure to tune in next time, and we'll see y'all later. Bye.